What I am holding in my hand is a little object whose concept is as simple as life-changing. It is a different idea of city, called Isobenefit Urbanism, or the Meta 1 Mile Green City. But I will talk about it a bit later. Let us first reflecting on why we need a new idea of city. Here are some numbers. Urban areas generate 80% of global CO2 emissions, use 80% of global energy, kill 5 million per year for air pollution. The latter costs $5 trillion per year in welfare. Cars occupy 60% of urban public spaces and cause over 1 million fatalities per year. US and UK commuters spend 20% of their monthly earnings on commuting, almost €10,000 per year. Natural contact is associated with increased physical and mental health. Compared to rural areas, the greater mental illness rate of cities costs $1 trillion per year. Urban temperatures are up to 5 degrees Celsius warmer than surrounding rural areas. This can be dramatically reduced by different planning of built and natural areas. How should we think and plan our cities for our well-being? We are used to seeing environmental or economic perspectives like these just shown, but not so much about our own human perspective, our human nature. We know so well about the ideal habitats of most species in the world, but we often don't pay much attention to how our own species' habitats should be, to our biological necessities for a happy and healthy life, both physical and mental. We all know rather well the effects that our cities can have in terms of carbon emissions, pollution, land use, energy use, congestion, economic outputs, or ecological impacts. We hear such information on a daily basis, but we are not hearing that much about what type of settlement our own human nature, Homo sapiens nature, fits best. Let us use this image for a moment to emphasize not that we are underground like chimps, we aren't, but to think about us as Homo sapiens, a specific species, and our habitats. We are a beautifully evolved great ape primate whose inner nature has necessities that cannot be ignored. We are a gregarious species needing a certain level of social life, a few in-depth quality relationships, enriched environments to fuel our creativity and intelligence, but not too enriched as to avoid overload, regular natural experiences in open air, parks, woodlands, lakes and the like. We will see an idea, Isobenefit Urbanism, about future human habitats, be they rural or mega-urban habitats, or a promiscuous, stimulating mix of them, in light of an anthropological perspective, which urbanism and planning should take into account to have healthier and happier rural-urban dwellers, namely healthier and happier societies that favour our individual and societal flourishment. We often live in suboptimal versions of our settlements. The attempt, in the end, is to bring what I could coin in this talk, and in a coming book, an anthropological evolutionary urbanism, to bear on traditional urban and social studies for the betterment of our settlements living. Let's start our anthropological view of cities with empirical evidence. Living in cities offers numerous comparative advantages over living in the countryside or in small villages and towns, such as better access to education, services, amenities, and jobs. However, over 100 academic articles in index journals show that urban living is also associated with a roughly twofold increase in the incidence of some mental disorders compared to living in rural areas. This link is often proven to be causal through longitudinal and dose-response analyses. Here are just a few examples of empirical evidence from the academic literature showing a relatively uniform increase in mental health issues related to settlement sizes, from rural areas to towns, cities, and larger cities. Scientists have taken photos of the brain, showing that it behaves differently depending on whether a person spent their childhood in a small village, town, or big city, as well as whether they currently live in a rural area, town, or city. They have also taken photos of the brain when a person is viewing a natural versus urban environment, observing different brain activity in distinct areas. Other scientists investigated life satisfaction across different settlement sizes and rather consistently reported greater satisfaction in smaller settlements rather than in cities. This happens in the richest countries, while the reverse in the poorest, probably because the richer, the more freedom to actually choose the place one truly prefers, rather than the place where one is obligated to live, if wanting the basic services and a job. The same pattern is observed for happiness and preferred residences. The larger the settlement size, the lower the reported happiness and preference. So far we have seen that the larger the cities, the greater the incidence of mental illnesses, and the lower the life satisfaction and happiness. We also saw that most people would prefer to live in smaller settlements if they could. There is another family of research called urban scaling. It observes quantifiable data, such as emissions, energy usage, land area, crime, GDP, infrastructures, etc., to see how these variables change with city size. Does a population that doubles also involve a double amount of these quantities, or more, or less? Urban scaling studies indicate that usually, the larger the city, the more we achieve in proportion. We get richer, more competitive, and we even consume less per capita in various aspects. The larger the city, the more diversity, wealth, intellectual achievements, and efficiency in infrastructures it tends to have. These factors are probably some of the reasons why most people move to or stay in cities. Cities can be great places to live and prosper, especially if we make them better suited to our human needs. Daily contact with nature, a clean environment, less stress, aesthetically intriguing spaces, without congestion or unpleasant commuting. In the first half of this talk, we saw that cities, despite many environmental issues and costs, have great potential and are successful in various aspects. However, they also experience higher rates of mental illness, unhappiness, and lower life satisfaction, and many people would prefer to live in smaller settlements. Anthropologically speaking, this preference could be linked to our biological nature, which is not fully satisfied in most modern cities. That is why we need a new type of city, designed around our fundamental human needs. By 2050, over 2 billion more people will be living in cities. This presents both a great opportunity and a significant responsibility to build these new cities in better ways. In this second part, we will discuss Isobenefit Urbanism, a new city model proposed in 2013, which has recently been gaining attention. Imagine a typical city with cars and their streets. Now imagine removing them if there were no longer a need for them, freeing us from their pollution, noise, costs, and the space they occupy on streets and in parking lots. Now imagine keeping all the buildings as they are, but rearranging them so that each one is no farther than 1 to 2 kilometres from a continuous natural area of parks, forests, and fields. Now imagine placing central hubs, or called centralities, with shops, schools, services, offices, pleasant promenades and squares, so that no point is farther than around 1 kilometre from the nearest hub. No matter where you are, you can reach a pleasant centrality or urban hub within approximately 1 kilometre, represented by the blue circles in this animation. Now the final step, connect all the hubs with public transport, ideally using sky trains and underground systems to keep the land free. The result is a city, an iso-benefit city, where, regardless of its size or your location, you are always within 1 to 2 kilometres of both natural land and the nearest central hub. There you'll find amenities, services, and pleasant squares. From these hubs you can quickly and easily reach any other part of the city via sky trains or underground transport. The land remains entirely free for parks, forests, and pedestrians. There are infinite urban forms that satisfy this model, allowing cities to self-organise without the need to follow rigid and static master plans. These forms can be either planned or emerge spontaneously by incrementally following a few simple local rules. That is isobenefit urbanism. Iso means equal, while benefit refers to the advantages one gains from proximity to urban amenities, services, and natural lands. If we call City 0.0 the earliest prehistoric settlements, City 1.0 the pre-industrial city, City 2.0 the industrial, and City 3.0 the currently post-industrial, what would City 4.0 be? Perhaps a meta 1-mile green city, implemented via the principles of Isobenefit Urbanism, a hyper-connected network of autonomous 1-mile radius walking units, seamlessly integrated into continuous natural landscapes. Isobenefit urbanism equally applied to low-density settlements, or a mix of densities, which they would form an isobenefit megavillage. Once linked together via sky trains and tubes, these units form a larger entity, maximising the economies of scale and agglomeration while eliminating their negative side effects. City 4.0 would be designed around human fundamental needs as a species. An updated version of City 0.0 and City 1.0, where people were able to daily walk and enjoy fresh air and nature. Yet, technology and networking would allow the achievements of City 3.0 and far beyond. How can we finance the construction of isobenefit cities? Well, let's first recall the numbers and costs mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, the enormous damages caused by conventional city designs. Isobenefit cities would significantly reduce, if not entirely eliminate, these costs, potentially saving trillions of dollars per year. Let's also remember the motion graphic we saw earlier. By keeping the same buildings, but reorganizing them into a different pattern, with functionally optimized locations, we can create an isobenefit city without additional costs. This can be easily implemented for any new settlement we need to build from scratch to accommodate the 2 billion new urban dwellers expected over the next 25 years. I think it is a feasible idea, which could make our lives better and our cities beautiful.